Yeah. Okay. Maybe also cut this. Because I'm going through different... let me check on it.
White race. White race.
White race.
White race.
White race.
White race.
White race.
White race. Alright, this is The Empire Never Ended. We are still in the general mindset of Nazis, occultists, a bunch of esoteric stupidity.
Not so esoteric in this episode, I think.
This episode, we're taking a step back from like this weird nerdy Satanism and going
grounded.
Yeah, much more grounded. And kind of more...
In the sense that nothing grows when you salt the earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of also the most important person next to Myatt that we've talked about so far, because...
This man is a meme.
He is, but he's also probably one of the most influential Nazis.
Is he? You would say that?
I would, yeah. I mean,
this is far
I
as
think
we
you might
go.
disagree, but I think within like the last 50, 60 years for sure.
Well, I think it's because you might have been told by somebody to read Siege, maybe. Maybe very enthusiastic.
I mean, hopefully you haven't, because the people that tell you to read Siege are fucking morons, but...
Yeah, but I mean, what are you going to do? You make a nice YouTube video about how to make berry pancakes, and the first comment is read Siege, you know?
That is true.
I mean, James Mason is a very specific character. I don't know, how would you describe him?
An old pervert.
Yeah, this is true, but...
He's an old pervert.
Old Nazi pervert.
I stand by him being influential, because he seems to be the only one that hasn't died... or gone to prison yet. Or like a long, life sentence in prison.
It's such a high bar for these people.
It is, because they fucking kill each other nonstop. And,
I mean, he is because, in a way, his book has been read for a couple of decades now, maybe even more than that, at least since the 80s, or early 90s.
Well, I mean, but before it was a book, it was newsletters that were being read as well. So, I mean, he was, active.
I think when it was a newsletter, he was not so influential. When it was made in the book in, 93, he was read by this kind of new scene of hipster fascists that then came to be in America. And he's read now by more terrorist-minded people.
We're talking here like Adam Waffen, the whole siege-pilled culture, which we'll also get into here, or in future episodes.
Did we say his name?
I did say it just now.
So Ray already mentioned it, but we are talking today about James Mason.
Mason.
James Mason. Mason. We've been trying to get his accent down, so Fritz and I will be playing around with that a little bit in this episode, and hopefully you will never actually have to listen to him, so you'll just take our word for it.
I'm more of an understudy, I would say, to Boris's Mason.
He has a very weird, and we'll get into why. I mean, he's from Southern Ohio, but he has a particularly kind of somewhere between, what do we say, Jimmy Stewart...
Sean Connery,
and Sean Connery, because he has a little bit of these sure.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
But at the same time, he almost talks like Jimmy Stewart.
Yes. Just Jimmy Stewart.
When I saw Hitler in his book for the first time when I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
See,
if it hadn't been for the Nazis, I'd be baking babies in microwaves now. That's not quite right. I can't do it. I can't. You gotta be our Mason.
I'll have to be our Mason.
It's a heavy burden, but I think you can carry it.
Somebody's got to do it.
All right, so James Mason.
Yeah.
How do we talk about this man?
Well, I guess from the start. I don't know. He was born in 1952 in Chillicothe, Ohio. So as Boris already said, when he was 14, in 1966, he joined the youth section of the American Nazi Party started by George Lincoln Rockwell. But he came apparently from a conservative family because already in 1960 he was attending Nixon rallies with his father when he was 8 years old. And then he was also, in 1964, he describes himself as a supporter of Barry Goldwater.
But, quote,
yeah.
Didn't know he was a Jew.
And also, I mean, when he was already a Nazi in 1968, he was a supporter of George Wallace. This was supposedly, like, probably the influence of his family. But as I said, in 1966, he became a proper Nazi. Before that, he was a science fiction fan, as he describes. He was totally nuts for this. And then somehow he switched to Hitler. But it was like usually through these kind of sensational stories of the time that Hitler is still alive in Argentina. So he was first interested in that, the connection of Nazis with UFOs and such stuff. And then he was reading some publication which was called Extremism USA. And there he found the address of the Nazi party and wrote to them and became a member of their youth section.
Was this like just one of these like shock and gore mags that were going around? Just Extremism USA?
Yeah, it sounds like this. And it sounds like, he switched from science fiction and this UFO sensationalist stuff to just being a member of the Nazi party because he thought it was super cool, I guess. And
well, yeah, and he also describes in this like interview, one of his interviews, I think with Tim Metzger, is where he's always had the feeling that America fought on the wrong side because they allied with the communists instead of working together to crush them.
Yeah. I mean, the American Nazi Party was also like a very, sensationalist, deliberately organization, which was started in 1959 by this guy called George Lincoln Rockwell, who was before that, during the Second World War, he was in the Air Force. So this is why later they all call him the commander.
Yeah, they call him Commander Rockwell.
Still Nazis
Commander
call him
Rockwell.
Like this. Totally nuts guy. But they had a lot of attention to them because they were basically like kind of brown shirt LARPers. So that, yeah, of course, brought a lot of attention to them. Also prone to violence and things like this. So Rockwell got killed in 1967 by another Nazi, a former member of his party, I think. We'll get into this murder a bit later. But this is one of there is a tradition of American Nazis killing American Nazis.
Yeah.
This is an important chapter in that story.
Something that they also acknowledge. I mean, at least Mason does when he talks to Metzger. It's like a perpetual problem of theirs that they just keep offing each other.
It's funny because that means, like, seriously, everybody hates Nazis.
Yes.
Like, at least some people. Yeah. Like, I don't know, Hojists. There's even Nazis hate other Nazis.
Yes, I mean, Hojists killed Hojists when they're in power, and so the state kills them. But Nazis do this just as private citizens.
As volunteers. Yeah, exactly.
So in 1968, Mason was back home in Chillicothe, Ohio, and he was having a lot of trouble in school. He was not like passing exams. He didn't want to study. He was trying himself to get expulsions from school for a couple of years in a row. He was not even a smoker, but he would smoke in school just to get busted.
Such a badass.
Yeah. And then they were on to him, so this was not working anymore. So what he decided to do, because he had access to a gun, he wanted to take this gun to go to school and murder the principal, the vice principal, and 2 student guides, and then himself. This was his plan.
So he was kind of like a proto school shooter, because this is what, 1966 or something?
68.
68,
yeah.
Well, he says that he would have been the first big school shooter. He also, much later in his idiotic life, ends up giving a lecture for some reason at the University of Phoenix, and he talks about this, which, by the way, just let that sink in how funny just that fact is.
To those that don't know, the University of Phoenix was kind of the first one of these online diploma mills.
It's like Trump University probably was modeled off of the University of Phoenix.
Yeah, it's like a total scam. You pay them money and they just issue a fucking whatever.
They're known for ripping off the military, ex-service members and things like this. So Mason gives a lecture there for some fucking reason.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
No? You do.
Okay. This is James. James, I can't think of your last name.
Mason.
Mason, I knew that. He has come here to talk about white supremacy, and he writes books and things, and I think you'll find them very interesting. Oh, okay.
People are asking him, why did you hate school so much? What was it about it? Did you hate the rules? And he's like, oh, I love rules. I need to know what they're about. And so he said, well, what specific rules did you hate in school? And what was it specifically that made you hate being there? And he said, I didn't hate the rules. I hated their ends. And the person said,
Which was?
You know what? I couldn't nail it down, and that's why I didn't want any part of it.
Yeah.
so he did these things for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of guy he is.
But before he went to school and shot anyone, he decided to call the usual thing when you're in crisis, you call the headquarters of the American Nazi Party.
Oh, it helped me through so many crises of
Yes,
mine.
in Virginia, and he talked to one William Luther Pierce, Dr. William Pierce.
Oh yeah, it's a famous name.
And then he just told him, okay, chill out and come, leave school and come to the headquarters of the Nazi Party and start working for us, which is what he did.
Yeah, he took a Greyhound bus to Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah, so William Pierce became kind of a mentor to him. William Pierce is an important figure in American Nazi history. Later, he would leave the Nazi Party and start his own organization, which is today probably one of the most, or even the most successful Nazi group in America, which was called the American Alliance. When he died, the National Alliance. So the National Alliance had, I think when Pierce died, he had like 2,000, 3,000 members, something like this. They also had a church that they founded, which was not a Christian church. They had their own specific theology and such things. But at this time, Pierce was one of the three leaders of the American Nazi Party because Rockwell was shot dead the previous year. So young James Mason joined them in the headquarters in Virginia, and he actually lived in the offices of the party, which he described were like very small and dirty and cold. And he learned the printing trade while he was there. He was their printer, and he slept on the floor next to the print machine.
Sorry, this story sounds really familiar, but I can't put my finger on why. Like a little boy sleeping on the floor of a studio. Is it Pinocchio?
So his Geppetto is fucking.
I can see him leaving high school and being like, I got no strings to hold me. Yeah, like I can see this.
I'm a Nazi now.
He got into some kind of biblical stuff later, like Pinocchio ended up in the belly of that whale and stuff. Maybe there's something here. All right, let's see if it's Pinocchio.
Yeah. So they had like the leadership, which was like three men. One was Pierce, one was some other guy, I don't remember his name.
Geppetto.
And the main guy was called Matt Cale, Mason calls him. Most people pronounce it Cole.
It's Koehl, I think.
Yeah, but I guess Mason is right, he knew him, I don't know, so he calls him Matt Cale. So he was the kind of a new commander of the American Nazi Party. But he also lived on he also slept in the office. Only Pierce and the other guy in the leadership had actual houses that they went back to.
So they just had their little clubhouse slumber parties.
Yeah. And Mason says, except the leadership, we lived life of dogs there. So quite miserable. He was paid $15 per week for the work he did.
Which in 1960 still wasn't shit.
Yeah. But it was fun for him because there was a lot of violence. So in 68 and 69, he was there with them, and he participated in a lot of violence against the anti-war movement and against the lefties. They would attack them. He described they used tear gas. Sometimes they used smoke bombs.
He rented a car or something. Oh no, he went to go to a dealership.
No, this is later. This is later. We'll come to that. This is what you described is the first time he went to jail. But this is a few years later. Okay. Yeah. So first they were attacking anti-war demonstrations and such things. And also one of his friends at that period was a guy called Joseph Franklin. So actually later he called himself Joseph Franklin. But Mason knew him as James Clayton Vaughan, Jr. Later, he renamed himself as Joseph Paul Franklin, so Joseph Paul after Goebbels, and Franklin after Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, okay.
Famous Nazi.
Yes, of course.
He is known because he's a serial killer who in the late 70s and early 80s killed about 20 people. He's
the dude that shot fucking Larry Flint, right?
Yes. He's the guy who shot Larry Flint, and after that, Larry Flint was disabled.
Yeah.
He also shot the civil rights activist Vernon Jordan. He also didn't kill him, but he killed about 20 other people.
His main targets, though, were, as far as I remember, miscegenators.
Yeah, interracial couples.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of black.
He was a vagrant. Like he did it all over the U.S. Like he'd travel from place to place.
He killed black people, Jews, and also interracial couples, as you said. All in all, like 20 people. So he was he got 6 life sentences and 2 death sentences. I think he was ultimately executed in jail.
Sorry, we're talking about Ben Franklin still, right?
Yeah. And also he was the guy that we previously mentioned, William Pierce, the founder of National Alliance. He was also a writer of 2 horrible Nazi novels.
I'd say that they're seminal.
Yeah.
This is like almost the start of the genre. Really.
Yeah. It was the Turner Diaries and Hunter. So I think both of these, or only Hunter, was inspired by Joseph Paul Franklin, because he describes basically a guy who's doing what he did, drifting around U.S. and killing non-white people and interracial couples.
And the Turner Diaries, of course, become very popular in those circles later.
And I think the first edition of the book is dedicated to this guy.
I would recommend anybody wanting to hear more about the Turner Diaries, check out Thought Slime's rundown of it on YouTube. It's kind of like what we do when we read Maya texts and things like that. He just gives you the short and dirty version and shit's all over it.
Yes. So, but at this time, Joseph Paul Franklin was still not a serial killer. He was participating, he was Mason's friend and comrade from the group, and they were participating in violence against leftist and anti-war groups. So, on one occasion, they sent specifically Joseph Paul Franklin to go into a building of some lefty or anti-war organization, and he dropped some smoke bombs inside that totally disrupted what was going on in there. But they sent specifically him because Mason says he looked least like a fascist among us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay.
So this was going on in this fun, this life of dogs, and also fun attacking anti-war activists and leftists was going on in 68 and 69. But by 1970, when Mason turned 18, he became a full-fledged member of the Nazi Party. He was also somehow disappointed. This was not exactly what he was. I mean, it was fun, but it was not as glorious as he imagined it would be.
He started getting disillusioned with some of the other people who he thought weren't really into it. They weren't like serious political organizers. They were just kind of treating it like a little personal clubhouse. And
Also, he and many others in the group, they didn't like the new leader, Matt Cale, who they thought was like a very uptight guy who was very strict about, how you behave, the length of your hair, if you use drugs or not, and such things. This was annoying to them. Pierce also didn't like Cale, and he left the party, and he was kind of a mentor to James Mason. But Mason stayed. He was already in 1970. He was disappointed and disillusioned, but met Cale. But he remained for another 6 years. He was still a member of the party. But he was very critical. I mean, he realized that they don't have any kind of serious social program or anything really. And also, I mean, what the sensationalist strategy of George Lincoln Rockwell failed. I mean, Rockwell was a completely crazy person also, because, I mean, he wanted to have this sensationalist kind of brown shirt LARPers, but he also seriously thought that by 1971 he will become the president of the country or something like this. This was his goal. Mm-hmm. And then he realized, okay, this is not going well. So in 1967 he changed the name of the party from American Nazi Party to American National Socialist, National Socialist White People's Party, which is, I guess, kind of
that's way more easy for the press.
Yeah.
More family friendly.
And then he did some tours where he completely dropped, I think, the Nazi name and not so much swastika and such things, but horribly racist stuff. Like they had this
Oh my God, yeah. They had this, they would do these, they had these like folk bands that was like, so like hootenanny bands, but they were called Hatenanny.
Oh God.
And like, holy shit, that is like some fucking crazy, like, it is just like over the top racist, like N-word in every song title.
Yeah, but this was him like making compromises, you know.
Yeah, this was him.
And some of the Nazis didn't like this. So Mason, even in one of the interviews that he gave in 2002, he suggests that Cale was basically the organizer of the murder of Rockwell because he didn't like the new direction where they were going to.
Is there any reason to think any of that is the case?
I'm just saying what Mason said. I mean, I don't know.
I don't see why not. I mean,
well, it's interesting though if he's just making knowingly making this up for a power grab. I mean, that's a different picture.
Well, he didn't want to be. This is interesting because he didn't want to be a leader. He was there because he didn't know what to do. I mean, many years later, 30, 40 years later, he was saying these things openly, that this is what he thinks. But who knows? I mean, but he stayed there. So maybe he even thought at the time that this is what happened, but he stayed until 1976. He remained a loyal party member. Even though, in the meantime, another figure who was important for him appeared. So this was Joseph Tomasi, who was the local leader of the party in L.A.,
and was apparently a much more skilled organizer than most other people in the
He's like the Fonz for them. He's their cool, handsome dude.
He had long hair, and he was like the...
which was unusual.
And he smoked weed and stuff like this.
Yeah, it went all the way down to below his ears.
Also, apparently even had some, he knew some women, which was controversial.
He knows girls.
Yeah.
We call them females. Damn it.
Actually, he doesn't. He calls them, Mason calls them young ladies.
Yeah.
Which we'll also see later.
Mason also, I have here, maybe I could just pull it up. So he says that in Siege, he says that a favorite line when asked if we would condone the killing of women and children in the event of an all-out race war is one whereby I correct the language by adding, you mean females and offspring? So... he does also think that.
Yeah.
So I think young lady is his term for literally young girls.
Yeah.
But, I mean, him and Tomasi, they're around the same age. And Tomasi, I mean, they had a kind of a similar background in that, but, from vastly different parts of the country. But Tomasi also got into the party very young, was a Nazi, in high school, and, stayed in it. And so they were kind of like the young blood in the party. Yeah. Like he said, they would when they did hang out a couple times at party headquarters, it was them drinking together, going out, meeting girls and
Tomasi
stuff.
saying, "Hey."
Yes. Yeah. So Joseph Tomasi, they also called him Tomato Joe. By the way.
Yeah.
It's
Italian.
It's a name for a cool guy.
So he was supposedly the kind of the bad boy of the party, although they were all complete psychos. But you can imagine what he was like. But he was also as Mason sees it, kind of in tune. He got the revolutionary vibe of the times, let's say. But I think all of this means that he was even a worse psycho than other people. I mean, this is basically what it comes down to.
I think he's Dennis from the Always Sunny gang.
Yeah.
They're all fucking psychos, but they're also idiots, and then the evilest guy of all.
Yeah. But I think that in the early 70s, I think 73 or something like this, Tomasi was kicked out by Cale from the party. The official reason was that they smoked weed in the party offices and also had some women there. So
he got kicked out for the coolest reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was kicked out. Also, it's interesting to say that after that, at some point after that, Cale renamed the organization from
the No Girls Club.
Yeah, almost to New Order. And Cale basically, New Order still exists. This is the American Nazi Party with the new name, but it ceased being any kind of a party. So it's basically a cult because Cale made some contacts with actual Nazis, traveled to Europe. He realized that actual Nazis think of American Nazi Party and Rockwell as kind of an embarrassment. So he reorganized it. He also met people like Savitri Devi and I think Miguel Serrano, who are so-called esoteric Hitlerists, who see Hitler as basically a new
He's like an avatar of Vishnu or something.
Yeah.
And
So New Order is basically a religious cult worshipping Hitler. Not very active. Kell died in 2014. They were doing some things, but not so very active. So Tomasi was kicked out of the Nazi Party, and in '74 he starts his own organization, which is called the National Socialist Liberation Front, NSLF. Originally, this name was used for the college group of the Nazi Party. By the way, David Duke was a member of this group. Right. But in '74, this is a separate organization. So they are. Mason says himself it was Joseph Tomasi and four more guys. Supposedly, if you listen to Mason or some people like this, they would describe NSLF as a kind of a edgy revolutionary group who they realized that there is no future in electoral politics, and they were like the only solution is revolution. The name is inspired by the leftist groups of the time, like Symbionese Liberation Front, and they started having their own newspaper, which is called Siege. This is like something that they supposedly took from the Weatherman. I don't know. The term. I'm not sure if this is true. And they used like Maoist inspired slogans, like the crack of gunfire is the only reality the masses care to pay attention to, and things like this. But if you look closely, what they actually did is like terrorizing people. I mean, their revolutionary side is basically terror. So they were terrorizing like black people, Jewish people, putting bombs, threatening people, such things. And in the video interview that Mason did in 2002, the Nazi interviewer asked him, like, is it true that NSLF people that they actually tortured like a sex worker and strip her of her clothes and then they chained her to a telephone pole, something like this? And Mason says, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that was kind of things.
That sounds about right.
So these are like the edgy revolutionary, people. It's total psychopaths. So in 1974, NSLF, Tomasi started the new group, but Mason was still, although he was a sympathizer of Tomasi, he was still a member of the party. And in 1973, as a member of the party, he, for the first time, went to jail. And this was for violence that him and his group of Nazis did against some black teenagers, including a 14-year-old teenage girl, which they attacked. This was Mason says this was an idea of someone else, but he was convicted. He got the harshest sentence, like he got 6 months of jail, I think, because he was deemed to be the leader of the group, which he says that he was. But he also says that this wasn't his idea, and this was stupid. But when Mason says that things like this are stupid, he doesn't mean in any way like
morally wrong. It doesn't mean they got something intellectually wrong about it. It means that they were less than careful.
Yeah.
It means they did it wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. They did the right thing the wrong way.
So first time he went to jail is because he and his gang attacked teenagers. This is the reason. So he got this prison sentence. He got out in '74, and he still remained a member of the party. While Tomasi was still alive, he met him first when they were both members of the Nazi Party. Then they were corresponding, Mason and Tomasi, for some time. But in 1975, Tomasi got killed. And he got killed by...
guess who? Another Nazi.
Again, he was killed in front of the headquarters of the Nazi Party by a member of the
But Nazi
this was
party. In LA, right?
I guess so, yeah. Because he lived in LA. Mason also has some ideas that basically Cale was behind this murder as well. About 1976... Mason was finally ready to leave the party, which he did. But he also, surprisingly, he was a sympathizer of Tomasi and stuff that he did, just terror, really. But he didn't go to this group. Okay, Tomasi was dead, but the group still kind of lingered on. He went to another split of the American Nazi Party, which was basically the copy of it. He was not satisfied, so after some time he left also that group.
But basically he says that his decision to leave the party kind of is rooted in his experience in prison, which he said that while he was there, he realized that he's either going to go back into prison. I mean, he will, but that if he's going to do it for building like a serious revolutionary political organization, not, you know.
Yeah, I hope that's how he ended up back in prison. Hope it wasn't something.
Well, we will see about that later.
Gross and embarrassing.
So in the late 70s, James Mason, he met some of the late Tomasi's collaborators, and he basically joined the remnants of what was the NSLF. So now,
which, if it was 4 people while Tomasi was alive, was now 3.
Probably, yeah. He said that when he was a member of the Nazi Party, what they were always talking about was like, because they were also disappointed that no one is really supportive of them. So they were always like, their mantra was, when things get bad enough, people will come to us.
Right.
That never happened. So he lost those kind of illusions. Now he was more into this Tomasi kind of stuff. Okay, people won't come to us, but if we will make them scared, and then they will kind of, I guess, listen to us or follow us or something like this.
But you know where this came from? This came from all of their shitty parents. Like, this is what every shitty parent says. Like, you'll thank me when you're older.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
yeah. So this is like when he hooked up with Tomasi's collaborators, and he became the editor of their newspaper Siege. Mason this time completely abandoned the strategy of building a legal public neo-Nazi party, and so he became interested in the so-called strategies of leaderless resistance things like this. Yeah, but he would later himself say that leaderless resistance is another name for failure, basically, which is interesting that he realizes this.
He might, or maybe just the day before he was arguing against some lone wolf type guy. And
yeah.
You never know with him. He switches around quite a lot.
Yeah.
I love terrorism. I hate terrorism.
Yeah. I mean,
worship Hitler.
He likes terrorism. I mean,
he likes terrorism.
Yeah.
I think, like, in the occasions that he says that he never supported violence is like when he's on TV.
It's also really, it's also lately.
I mean, this is basically when he's in mood. He's like basically mood of like talking to cops. So he says, "Okay, I'm not a terrorist." But I mean, in any other occasion, he says that he's.
It's like, I never advocated violence. Wink, wink.
No, then why am I reading Siege?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, because now he's even radicalizing more. So he's coming from. This is in the 1980. I think his first time when he starts connecting with the Manson family, which becomes a hugely important thing for him. So he was not the first person in this group who was into Manson, but I think he was the first who tried contacting the Manson family. First, I think Lynette Fromm and Sandra Good, and then they connected him to Charles Manson himself, who he corresponded with for years.
I like that you just said that so casually, as though listeners of the show are just like, oh yeah, Charles Manson just showed up in the story.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, okay, but this is like really, if you look at it, it's not, so ridiculous, because we know that, there are different versions of what and why happened with Charles Manson and the murders they commit. But no one really denies that Charles Manson was super racist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that he believed that a race war is going to come. And that he was firmly on the side of whites in this race war. Charles Manson even himself later, he said that he was when he was younger like a sympathizer. In some letters that he wrote that he was a sympathizer of Rockwell. He even calls him Commander Rockwell, like a Nazi would. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's very clear. And he welcomed Mason. Like he was waiting for someone like Mason to write to him. So they really clicked really well. Mason was kind of amazed with Charles Manson, and often he would describe him as a kind of a new Hitler or Jesus. These are figures that he compares Manson to.
There's you can find on YouTube this really great, I could say, piece of knitting art that Manson sent to Mason, mm-hmm. and at first you want to say it's like a knit hat or something, but it doesn't open. It's like a dense kind of triangle of like 30 different kinds of yarn all tied up in a clump, and this is something he sent.
That was his gift.
That's his, that's how, I don't know, kind of sweet.
Yeah.
They also bonded on the fact that they're both from like the same area of Ohio too, right. And like Manson like was really delighted by this.
Yeah. So maybe now you can read the.
What I discovered was a revelation equal to the revelation I received when I first found Adolf Hitler.
Yeah,
that's good.
So I mean, so now Mason is like totally pro Manson, and he through like Charles Manson helped Mason realize that Hitler's death was really the end of Western civilization. So that he already lives in the kind of apocalypse.
Right.
I mean, it's all over already, and that now like there is only an anti-white global conspiracy run by super capitalists and super communists, and nothing about Western culture or its institutions could be salvaged or is worth salvaging, really. So it all needs to be blown to smithereens.
It's just like a human organism that has ingested a fatal dose of poison. If you fall asleep with it and try to ride it out, you're going to die. But if you suddenly become violently ill and expel that poison, even though the experience may be rather unpleasant, you at least have a chance to live. Manson called that helter-skelter.
Yep. So this even bothered some of his like super violent Nazi comrades at the period from NSLF. So they were pro-violence, pro what they saw as a revolution, but they were not into Manson.
So you take it too far with this Manson shit, okay, yeah. Mason?
Do you know how he defended Manson?
I know your name's later, one letter off from...
He, at one point, will write that one of the great things about being into Manson is that if you say Hitler, everybody's all over you for being a Nazi. And if you say Manson, people are like, "Oh, that's weird."
Yeah. I plan to come to this. Like he had a few reasons why he thought Manson was great,
right?
For the movement. But I mean, he split with some part of the probably tiny group of NSLF, and then they had like a gentleman's agreement. So they agreed that okay, we'll keep the NSLF, and you can get a certain amount of money, and you can also get siege to make it your own thing. So Mason thought this is great. And around Siege, he formed a new group, even smaller probably, which was called Universal Order. And the name of the group was directly suggested by Charles Manson. And also the logo of the group was designed by Charles Manson.
Charles Manson said so after Mason suggested the original name, and Manson said, "Don't call it that, call it this."
Yeah. Manson had this vision that this is like a continuation of National Socialism, but it has to be a new thing.
Right.
Like something completely new.
He didn't think anybody was going to pay attention to something called like party or...
Yeah.
All right.
Too many papers. I'm completely lost in all of this.
It makes us... the papers make us sound really learned.
Yeah.
Ray Ray hasn't entered the digital age. Motherfuckers got like 200 pages worth of printed material in front of him.
So I mean, at this point, like Mason is completely into Charles Manson. I mean, just the fact that he compares him to Adolf Hitler and Jesus Christ all the time, I mean, tells you a lot. He also calls him like the most important national socialist alive. I mean, this is really how he sees him.
No two ways about that.
Yep.
Which is, I'm sorry, it is kind of funny that he thinks that, given that, like, you know, there's still, like, in Europe at this time that he's doing this, there's, like, serious, like, National Socialist terrorism, like, Gladio crazy Matt, like, and, like, Charles Manson.
Yeah. Well, he thought that he's like...
That's a good point. I never thought about that. Yeah.
But he thought, okay, they are people of the previous era, and this is the era of Charles Manson. I mean, he literally...
It's American.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so there's a few reasons. Okay, the text useful for this is one text from the blog Who Makes the Nazis. It's a text from 10 years ago. We have a link for it if you want to look at it. I recommend it. It's a very good text. So this text analyzes Mason's relationship to Manson, and he mentions that there are a few reasons why Mason thought that Manson is so important. So first reason is that actually, I mean, Manson had Nazi beliefs, or at least extremely racist beliefs, and sympathies for Hitler that he didn't hide. They also, in their new framework, the ideological framework, they could completely justify the killings that the Manson family did. They said, okay, these were not they were white people, but some of them were Jews. They were race traitors. They were liberals. They were degenerates. They were like drug users or drug dealers, which are all legitimate targets. But also, this is now, I think, Mason at his smartest. So pay attention.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'm not saying this is super smart, but it's
the best he's got.
yeah. So he thinks that Manson represents the great divide between those persons who imagine there still are choices to be made casually on the basis of establishment mores, and those who have a profound individual sense of no going back. So also he makes this comparison that how, I think Rockwell said that Nazism or Hitler, it's a threshold of anger. Like when you're angry enough, this will be attractive to you. And now he goes, Mason goes a step more, and he says, Charles Manson, he's a threshold of alienation. So he thinks if you're alienated enough from the society, Charles Manson will become attractive to you.
I think that's great because we could say the same thing about Mason now for people like Adam Waffen, etc. Siege culture on the rise.
I mean, this is not incorrect, I would say.
No,
not at all.
It is
so,
correct.
I mean, it's interesting that someone has such a kind of completely alienated to the point of complete nihilism, but has some kind of self-awareness of this and thinks this is good.
Although I guess he does make a big deal out of being alienated. Like that's a big part of his self-narrative, that he never fit in, etc. It was always somehow outside all the organizations, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is true, but there is a part that needs to be added that he doesn't add, that also you need to have like sociopathic tendencies for this to be attractive to you. I mean, alienated, yes, but also sociopathic. Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of alienated people. Not all of them are going to adopt Manson thought.
No, I mean, look, they couldn't get the electoral power that they wanted ever. They were always shocked that nobody fucking followed them, even though it's just common sense and self-preservation, and it's in like the genetic code for white people to save their own race, but like nobody gives a shit about them and laughs in their face all the time.
Yeah.
I would feel alienated.
And so there's also a few other reasons that he basically he thinks that Manson is like the National Socialist of our times or his time, is that Manson is hip and appeals to the young. So, and also he says, like, from direct personal experience, I tell you that the name of Manson can be used for the same purposes the name of Hitler can be used, minus the 90% of the usual hassles which immediately followed due to the huge job of conditioning that the Jews had done on people over the last 40 or 50 years. Right. So, like, Manson is like Hitler, but without all the baggage.
Yeah.
So, like, a good example of how completely nihilistic Mason at this time were some of his thoughts about the human life or life in cities, for example.
If atomic warfare destroyed all human life on Earth but 2 Aryan specimens, we could begin again. I've often stated that the conditions of U.S. cities make a positively attractive case for atomic warfare.
Yep.
Can you tell us the name of that essay, please?
The essay is U.S. Cities, Hazardous Gene Dumps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He hated people.
Yeah, he really did not like us.
No. So before we go to the next phase of Mason's life, we're just going to recap what we talked about so far. So we talked about basically his childhood coming from a conservative family, his first interest to Nazism when he shifted from sci-fi and aliens to Nazism.
The other major pipeline besides jihad.
Yeah. Then his first contact with the Nazi party, his love of the violence that it offered, but also disappointment in the kind of life.
Meeting Nazi Fonzie.
Yes. His disappointment in the Nazi party, his love for Joseph Tomasi, a total Nazi psychopath, and his...
slash cool dude.
Yeah, yes. And his contacts with his followers in the NSLF organization. And then his revelation in finding out about Charles Manson, how he's the most important National Socialist of our times, and basically knew Jesus Christ.
And best songwriter.
Yes. A combination of Jesus Christ and Adolf Hitler.
And Elliot Smith.
Yeah. And so we come to the newest phase. So this is now already 86, 87. And he wrote this the wave of Charles Manson, and this was a really new and exciting thing for him. But it was also starting to get old a bit for him. He also talked about how he started to become a bit disappointed in Manson and his family by this period, because he couldn't believe, because he said you couldn't believe it, like Charles Manson, he got a lot of money. And then he would just give all of this money to something like Save the Whales or something. Yeah. And so this, I think, really pissed him off.
No one is good enough.
Yeah. I mean, he's like promoting him, like, and then he doesn't give him any money, and he gives it to Save the Whales.
Fucking whales.
Yeah.
And Mason's not living large at this point.
No. He did not have a successful life.
And so in about 80, so another thing happened is that he had a collaborator, a comrade, I think George Laws or something like this, I'm not sure about the name, but he started suspecting that this guy is an informant. And then he started asking around, and he said something like, it's a bit interesting, he said something like, I asked, one of our guys was an attorney, but he was also a former FBI guy, and then he was like asking around, and he confirmed that this person in fact is working for I guess the FBI or something like this.
Yeah.
And then he offered, okay, if you give me $500, the lawyer offered to Mason, if you give me $500, I have my private detective, and he will research this for you. And Mason also knew that he was not only the only target of this, the interest of the informant. It was the targets were also Tom Metzger, the Nazi leader of the white Aryan resistance. Yeah. Then also Richard Butler, the leader of Aryan nations, and also a third guy. I don't remember the name of the third guy. So Mason decided that he wrote a letter to all of these three men and said, okay, listen, there is this FBI guy who's interested in all of us. I have a guy who has a detective. He can research this for us, but we need to let us make together get, what's the word? I don't know. Crunk. The $500.
Sorry, I don't know what word you're looking for.
Chip in.
Chip in. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
So if we all chip in some money, we can get the $500 to hire the detective. And no one even replied to him. He was so offended, that at least they didn't even say politely no or something. No one replied.
Just ghosted.
And for him, this was too much. And on that occasion, he decided to stop publishing Siege. And to just
a tantrum.
Give up. So in 87, he published a few pamphlets, and he decided, okay, this is it. He was basically ready to leave the movement. So he was so pissed off because also he said he knew if he got into trouble, no one would help him. No one is interested.
Probably true.
Yeah.
So he was very disappointed in Nazis. By the way, there was a trial for sedition on all of these men, except him, I think. Mm-hmm. And that guy who he thought was informant was a federal witness in that trial.
Hey.
And then he said they were interested in me, wanted to
Mason
talk to
always says, I can smell a cop from a mile away.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah.
I mean, because he hangs out with them so much, he knows exactly what they smell like. So. But then, okay, so he planned to retire. But something happened, which is maybe the most important thing that ever happened to him, unfortunately to us, is that, so in 87, he received a postcard, a letter from a young man in his late teens, early maybe 20s, called Michael Moynihan, who wrote to him he's an American guy, but he wrote to him for some reason from Europe, and basically said that how much he likes his writings and so on. So Michael Moynihan was already starting to be an important or well-known, at least not, if not important, figure in the industrial neo-folk music scene. He's the founder of the band called Blood Axis. So probably if you know anything about the neo-folk scene, you know about this guy. But what he is most famous for is that he is the person who wrote the book Lords of Chaos, about the Norwegian black metal
which was turned into a movie.
Yes. The movie Lords of Chaos is based on this book. But this guy is a fascist. he's a fascist of a kind of a hipster kind. So a lot of people overlook the fascist side of people like him, but he's no doubt a fascist. And so he became a correspondent to James Mason, and after some time, I think in 89, he had a proposition for James Mason. So he told him, if you send me the whole collection of all the editions of Siege, I will make a book out of it. And Mason quite liked this idea, and he sent this to Michael Moynihan. Then, so a few things happened in Mason's life at this point, which postponed the edition of the book. So in 1988...
Totally normal things.
Yes.
Could happen to anybody.
In 88 and in 91, his house was raided by cops on 2 occasions. And I think on both occasions they found books of photos of a naked underage girl, I think 15 years old. I mean, I think maybe it was the same girl in both times. I'm not sure.
We're talking about 2 different arrests.
Yes.
We're talking about one in like 88 and one in like 90 something.
91,
right?
yes.
Yeah. And this, keep in mind that in Siege, Mason writes, there are 2 rules. Number 1, cut your losses. Number 2, never make the same mistake twice. But then, if you look really carefully, there's a little asterisk, and it says, except when it comes to making kiddie porn.
Yeah.
That's a general exception for Nazis.
I mean, especially, specifically photos of naked 15-year-old girls. This is what he did at least 3 times or 4 times in his life.
Yeah. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah. So he went to jail, but this time it was not a long sentence. I think 90 days or something like this. And then he got out, and in 92 he moved to Colorado. I think the name of the town, it was Las Animas, I think.
Yeah,
it's like 2,500 people, small town. And what happened is this, late 80s, early 90s, is that Michael Moynihan connected Mason to the new scene of this kind of, I call them hipster Nazis, I don't know how would you describe them. Most of them are some kind of artists or musicians that formed around the guy that we mentioned already a few times called Boyd Rice of the musical project Non, who I hate. And also, so Michael Moynihan is a part of that, Boyd Rice is a part of that, also Nicholas Schreck of the band Werewolf Order, or Radio Werewolf, rather. And his soon-to-be partner, Zina LaVey, who is the daughter of Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan.
And Xena, Warrior Princess.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't quite describe it necessarily as hipster Nazis, because that has a particular connotation.
Oh, especially now.
That this precedes by several decades. No. But I would say that they were hip Nazis, they.
I mean, I want to say
they're part of this kind of developing goth scene. Yeah, basically.
But I mean, I use this word hipster also, maybe instead of the word arty farty or something like this. People who they use their supposed creative side or being controversial in some way as a cover for being actual fucking Nazis. Is what they are.
Yeah.
So also a part of this same group we're seeing is Adam Parfrey, who will soon become the founder of the Feral House publishing house. Also the cartoonist Nick Bugas, who's drawing horrible racist cartoons and also kind of accepted even now by some liberals. I don't know if there's maybe a few other people. So, but at the same time, so they're organizing. I think they're mostly from California from this period. They have their own different kinds of projects, musical projects, publishing projects, art projects. A lot of it involves some form of Nazi ideology. Also, they start something that they called Abraxas Foundation, which they themselves describe as a social Darwinist fascistic think tank.
I mean, it sounds like one.
Yeah. I mean, but Moynihan, from what I understand, he's kind of New England aristocracy. I think he was this Boston, went to fucking, all these fancy private schools kind of kid.
Yeah. Most of them, I think, are pretty well off.
Yeah.
I mean,
just not the case with James Mason.
No. He also has a kind of middle class, I guess, lower middle class
He describes himself as a Ohio farm boy.
Well, I mean, his parents were not farmers. I mean, I think his mother was a nurse or something. So, yeah. This scene formed and James Mason became a part of it. But they also had direct contacts with Nazis, not only with Mason. They had contacts with Tom Metzger, for example, also with the American Front that we mentioned in the last episode, which was formed in about this time, 87. So the first leader of the American Front, I think I called him Hayek, was also frequented their public events. You can see them all in photographs together. All of these people that I mentioned, and with Mason. Also, what is characteristic for them is that they were all members of Church of Satan at this period.
Hey.
So, Church of Satan, I mean, the Satanic Bible that LaVey wrote is based on a rip-off of an earlier book written by a guy called Ragnar Redbeard. Obviously a pseudonym, still not certain who this person was, but it's just a brutal social Darwinist, basically fascistic book.
Right.
And these people are all openly kind of very, social Darwinist fascists. And they embrace Mason. So Mason, he was totally down, he wanted to give up, and suddenly he's a part of this new hip scene that's so interested in him.
Right.
So they start also publishing and promoting him. So Adam Parfrey, before he started the publishing house, he did his first publishing project, which was called Apocalypse Culture, which is really, I think we'll go back to this book, because this book is an important kind of artifact in this development of this nihilistic fascist culture, I would say, that disguises itself with something else. So it's a collection of all kinds of disgusting, horrible texts, promoting, among other things, pedophilia, terrorism.
I don't know, that doesn't sound like something this show would be interested in.
Yeah.
We don't usually...
We definitely haven't covered anything remotely similar to that at all.
So Mason's text was included in this, for example, in 87 probably. When he started the actual publishing house, the first book that Parfrey published was a book compiled by Nicholas Schreck, which was called The Manson File, which is like a very completely pro Charles Manson kind of apologist book. And also in this book, texts by James Mason are included, praising, exactly as we said, praising Charles Manson as the most important National Socialist.
Man, when your best character witness is fucking James Mason.
Yeah. And Nicholas Schreck also at the same time, he made a film which is called Charles Manson's Superstar, and he interviewed James Mason for this.
Charles Manson, Superstar.
A lot of promotion of James Mason by these people. In 93, finally, Moynihan did what he promised to do, and he published Siege as a book. This was the first edition of Siege as a book, and it was heavily promoted by this crowd of people, and so it got attention by not only strict Nazis, but these kind of people. Mm-hmm. So I would like to go back to the text that I already mentioned, which is actually called Michael Moynihan's Siege Mentality. So, it has a few good takes on this whole crew and what the connection of Mason with them is. So, for example, there is a quote from the text that says, "Being of an essentially petty bourgeois frame of mind, Mason fetishizes bourgeois morality by focusing obsessively on the need to overcome it. The idea runs like a mantra through his writing. Basically, anything is allowed."
Do what thou wilt.
Yeah. So this is kind of this is the connection also. Between Mason and this group of people that, as I said, were all fans of Anton LaVey. Mason also became a fan of. He met Anton LaVey through them, and he was also kind of really impressed by him. He's also Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. He's of Jewish origin, and Mason knows this, but he compares him all the time to Rockwell. He says they are very similar characters, and
Wow.
he's very proud of the Satanic Bible that he gave him as a present, LaVey, and with a dedication. I don't remember what the text is, but they obviously liked each other very much.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't know that part, actually.
Another quote from this text is Mason shares with LaVey a tedious petty bourgeois contempt for the masses, and a philosophy which says it is acceptable to treat them as you like as long as you can get away with it.
The masses live only to produce and consume, to masticate and to defecate.
Ugh.
Wasted exercises in protoplasm. Here only to breathe the air and take up space. No really valid reason for living.
He's talking about us, guys.
God damn it.
This is also the period of the so-called satanic panic. So a lot of these people were, as representatives of Church of Satan, very much had a lot of media attention to them, which they enjoyed, I think. Although now they say how it was horrible, people wanted to murder them, but it's very clear for like what they were doing there that they wanted attention.
Right.
Yeah, they weren't like the victims of the satanic panic. They weren't like
they tried to represent
high school kids in the South.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
And so some of this attention also went to Mason via them. For example, one of the hustlers who was interviewing a lot of these people at the time was this Christian fundamentalist radio guy called Bob Larson.
Bob Larson.
Oh, yeah. Bob Larson.
I
Yeah.
grew up with Bob Larson, man. I listened to him and his exorcism show every time I could. I tried to get on it once, but we couldn't get in because the crowd was so big. There was no point in trying to get in there.
So he interviewed all of these people that I mentioned.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic interview.
Yeah, Bob Larson interviewed all of these people many times. Some of them more than once, 3 or 4 times. And all this, they all say, because he was like doing sensational interviews with Nazi Satanists, things like this.
Yeah.
And he was pretending to be completely shocked. But they all say how he was completely like nice to them, off-air, and this was like a mutual benefit kind of relationship. And he interviewed James Mason on a couple of occasions, sometimes solo, sometimes with his friends from the scene that I described. I think on one occasion he was there together with Michael Moynihan and with Boyd Rice. It's a particularly disgusting episode because I think mother of Sharon Tate calls in, then they make fun of her and like they make fun of the murder of her daughter like in a completely disgusting way. And I think in this episode Michael Moynihan is like presented by Bob Larson as a member of Universal Order, which he doesn't deny at all.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that counts as a sinister dialectic, it's got to be James Mason and Bob Larson interviewing each other multiple times.
Yep. At this point, in these interviews, Mason is like a hardcore atheist, which just, shows that being an atheist doesn't make you smart in any way.
No.
Okay, so as we said, during this whole time when he is connected to this new scene, he moved to Colorado in 1992, and now James Mason lives in the small town of Las Animas.
Working, I believe, at a Kmart.
Oh. I think he was working in Kmart until recently. I'm not sure if he worked back then because he's still in Colorado, but he changed. I think he's in a bigger city now.
He's in like a suburb of Denver, I think.
Yeah. So, he arrived in 92 there. He arrived actually with a partner. I don't know if this was his wife or not, but he left him after some time. And then a very important thing happened on Halloween in 1993 to Mason. So James Mason decided to call the cops on a bunch of kids who tipped over a plaster deer in his yard.
Well, that makes plenty of sense because I know that in Siege he specifically says, and I'm quoting, the only thing lower than N-words and Jews is police that protect them. Then he says, if there's trouble, call a cop. If you believe that, then please stay away from me. But unless they tip over your reindeer.
This is like so,
fucking swat those motherfuckers.
This connects perfectly what we read from the text from the Who Makes the Nazis blog about them being essentially very petty bourgeois. Because, is there anything more bourgeois than calling the cops on kids who
ruin your decorations on Halloween?
This is such a...
And that's like a classic, it's a prank, right? They were like, it's Devil's Night or
he's
something,
like the most extreme ideologue of total war against the system.
Yeah.
Sorry, why did he have... It wasn't like a reindeer. This isn't a Christmas decoration. This is just like a...
Halloween decoration, I guess.
A special Halloween deer.
Yes.
Or it's probably just like...
everything.
It's just probably like in like those rural places people have like, they're into like hunting and deer and shit.
Yeah, you see that kind of shit around.
Deer and like...
Yeah.
So on this occasion, the cop who responded was a local cop called Robert Keenan. And Keenan introduced himself to Mason, and he actually said that he knows who he is. That
Yeah.
they met earlier. There was some connection to Mason's ex-partner. Mason didn't remember this, but Keenan said to him like, "Oh, I know who you are. I like your politics. Also, like your wife told me great things about you." So Mason acknowledged that at this point he knew that he was bullshitting because his ex-wife hated his guts.
Like
no way
everybody.
he would not. There would no way that she would tell anything nice about him. But still, he befriended this cop, Robert Keenan.
Yeah.
This will end by Robert Keenan putting Mason into prison for 3 years. But as Mason said, he certainly kept the local punks off the deer in my yard. So I guess he was satisfied. What happens next is that now Mason lives alone. His partner left him, so he's lonely and he likes teenage girls, as he admits all the time. So he calls his friend, the neo-folk musician Michael Moynihan, and asks him if he knows any available girls for him. And Michael Moynihan says, "Yeah, this is what James Mason says in an interview that he gave in 2002 that you can find on the internet. It's a video interview." And Michael Moynihan says, "Well, there is this girl called Eva, and she also is a daughter of some Nazi guy. It seems that
She comes from a good family then.
Yeah. Mason knows her father, and so."
How old is Mason at this point?
Well, he was born in 52. This is 94.
Damn.
So too old.
Yeah, she's 15. And so Mason writes her a letter, and he puts a telephone number there, and she calls him. And apparently, Eva is having trouble at home. She doesn't like her family. She wants out, and they also want her out. So she immediately moves into Mason's place, and they start a relationship. They are like a couple now. But we know that. So Eva is interesting because Eva is also. She's a troubled person, obviously, in many ways. Yeah. But I think she's connected with. We can't blame her. She's 15. Her father is a Nazi.
Yes.
She's trying to get away from this. She also, I think, is connected to the scene that I just described, the arty-farty fascist scene. Is the way I describe it. Maybe you describe it another way. Because she's also present in some photographs of the event they organized together with Mason. She's also a fan of Charles Manson, and she corresponds with Richard Ramirez. So she moves in at Mason's place and has non-stop telephone calls with Richard Ramirez. Infamous serial killer, Satanist serial killer called the Night Stalker. And she was corresponding and like talking to over telephone with him all the time. She made a huge bill for Mason to pay. But she was also like, she had an active part in this whole pro-serial killer, pro-Manson scene. So she would go to, she was a part of, also this was kind of maybe late phase of this satanic panic thing. So there was a lot of these shows. I don't remember, I'm not American, so I don't exactly remember the names of the shows, but they were like shows of Jerry Springer type, I would say. So dedicated to the topics of like Charles Manson and Richard Ramirez, with having like pro people there and anti people there, and then they would fight. So she was a guest at these shows, at least on I think 3 occasions.
Yeah, I see here that she was on the Bertrice Berry show, talking about Charles Manson. She's a Manson
and
fan.
she was the one talking about Richard Ramirez, and then she had a fight with another Richard Ramirez fan on a physical fight. You can find these things on with YouTube still.
The murder the most strange murder. What did he do in that?
That amazed me. I didn't hear about that till after I was writing it for a while, and he didn't really want me to read all the articles about him because I think he didn't want me to find out about it. But I heard he broke into somebody's house and ripped out her eye and had sex with her eye socket.
How old are you?
16.
Man, they don't make TV like they used to.
Yeah. So she had an active life. So she came to live in Mason's home in December of 1993. Sorry, and in January 94 she already left to do these shows, and she wasn't back at Mason's place for I think 2 months or something like this. So in the meantime, Mason found another 15-year-old girl. He met her somewhere, and he invited her to his home. Or apparently also because he knew her father, so he wanted to show her some pictures of his father. I don't know.
That's
yeah,
disgusting.
Yes, and then he visited him with a male friend who was like 19, 18, something like this. Immediately on that occasion...
Did you know his father too?
No, he didn't. But immediately on that occasion, he took some naked pictures of her, I think, with the boy present. And then he says she got rid of the boy, and then they like kissed, and there was like some petting involved or something like this.
Ugh.
Yes. So he had a sexual thing with another anonymous 15-year-old girl. So in March, Eva comes back, and she finds out about this other girl, and she befriends her, and they become friends. So they were all hanging out. Mason says at some point all three of us hanging out, but it's not completely true because there was a fourth person who was hanging out.
What was this one, 14?
No, does he know?
No, this is an older person. This is the cop Robert Keenan.
Oh, right.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's also, Mason befriended this asshole. So they were all friends together, like these two assholes, and sometimes some other cop friend would come. So they would drink alcohol with these girls, they would get naked, there was like sexual stuff going on. Usually what they mention is like not actual sex, but like kissing and them getting naked and getting like being photographed, like putting lotion on them.
So that's not better. That's not better.
Yeah, I'm not saying
I mean, it's the other one's worse, but this one's not better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So there was like a particular party that they had. It was like the cop Keenan, Mason, the two girls, and another cop. And after that, I think a few days after that...
This is like True Detective shit.
Yes.
This is...
So on the 30th March of 94, Mason is arrested. And he's arrested because of this partying. He's not arrested by Robert Keenan, but he's like the complainant. He read the paper and he got arrested because of his friend. Robert Keenan, the cop.
Robert Keenan, the pedophile cop.
Yes. So he goes to jail and spends about a month there. He has some serious charges against him. I think I don't remember exactly charges. Initial charges are, I think, exploitation of minors or something like this. But two counts of them. So, for one, the maximum sentence is like 16 years because there were two counts. I think it was possible technically for him to go to prison for 32 years because of this. But what is interesting is that in Colorado, it's not illegal to have sex with a 15-year-old. So this was not the illegal part. The illegal part was taking photographs of a minor.
Okay, yeah.
And that's like
it's like child pornography
standards.
Yeah.
You know, there's a line.
And also giving alcohol to minors. So these were
Of course, that's like a big thing. You can have sex with a 15-year-old.
Yeah, it's not
you
great.
Give them alcohol.
It's
just fucked up ass.
Yeah. So he was let out of prison after a month, but he was forbidden to have any contacts with Eva and the other girl. So Eva moved out of his house and she lived in some mobile, what is carriage home? Carriage home? Is that a...
Carriage home?
Yeah. So she lived in that which was like behind Mason's house.
Oh, carriage home. It's the fucking, you know how some places have small apartments above the garage?
Yeah.
I think that's what that is.
Okay.
Yeah. So she lived in that kind of home, which was like right next to Mason's home, and he was forbidden to have any contacts with her. And she started actually, while he was in prison, she started hanging out with some people who were on age, and she found a new boyfriend. And the new boyfriend was a Latino man who was like 19 years old.
Shit.
Which was really hard for Mason. I mean, he was bothered enough that she was corresponding with Richard Ramirez, who was also, I think, Mexican.
Yeah.
But now she had an actual boyfriend who was like a young Latino man, 19 years old, and he couldn't have any contacts with her, but she would hang out with this young man every day, just next to his house. So he was like super pissed off. And on one occasion, Eva was sitting with her new boyfriend in the boyfriend's truck, and Mason was super pissed off. So what he decided to do is just to go and talk to them, and to carry a gun. and he approached them. He was not allowed to talk to her, but he was allowed to talk to the young man. So this is what he decided to do. And James Mason is very pissed off that no one quotes him right on what he said. I guess this is very important for him. So he said something like, "Oh, listen, no hard feelings, but does she still make you wear a condom? Because she never made me wear a condom."
Oh, that's what he says?
Yes, that's what he says.
What a little fucking dick.
Yes.
What a nerdy piece of shit.
Yes.
Oh, I bet he walked away being like, I bit that fuck.
No, he didn't walk away because Eva got super pissed off and she attacked him. Apparently, at least that's what he says. And so the young boyfriend, he was like probably trying to kind of prevent Eva from killing Mason.
Right.
And Mason, I guess at that moment threatened them with a gun or just pointed out that he has a gun or something like this. So he walked away home, and Eva and the boyfriend called the cops. So Mason got arrested, and he so he's an idiot. I mean, this is the so
I don't know what to say.
So far we know that James Mason, this great ideologue of total struggle against the system,
a guy who's become like who's transcended himself and become an internet sensation, a second life now. This man that everybody says they have to read to join the
# read siege.
My God, and this is the man.
Yep.
This is their little Vindex, huh?
Yes. And then, so what happens is that...
Yeah, you got mad at a dude who stole away his child.
Yes.
That he...
I mean, like, yeah...
How dare you have a more age-appropriate relationship.
Yes.
I mean, listen, like, he was... You know that first time he went to prison was for beating up black teenagers, including a 14-year-old girl. This is why he went to prison initially.
Yeah.
Then he went to prison for having pictures of a 15-year-old girl twice, in 88, in 91. And now again, he was first arrested because of a photograph of two 15-year-old girls, and now for again having fights with teenagers.
Yet he still complains that there aren't enough women in the movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why would that be?
Yeah. So while he's in prison, another thing happens, which is that the other girl, the anonymous girl, I guess tells her mother what was going on and that she had a relationship with a cop who arrested the other man.
That's another interesting story.
Yeah.
And so her mother is, I think, an ex-cop herself, I think. So she goes to the police with her daughter and they give a statement, and she accuses the cop Robert Keenan of sexual assault, I think.
Yeah.
And she gives a statement. Nothing happens really. All the officials in the city were saying like, okay, this is not great what the cop Robert Keenan did. It's maybe not ethical, but it's not illegal.
Let me just say what she says that he did. One of the moments that she mentions is they went out to some sort of a sports field and went down on each other and stuff like this. And she's still underage, right?
She says oral sex. Yeah.
But and this is, at the time, he is supposedly overseeing her case, right?
Yeah.
And she brings him nude photos that Mason took.
He's overseeing her case and also drinking with the person who's supposedly
and then while they're doing the dirty in this baseball field, he says but I'm not going to have sex with you until this case is over. This is his standard. This fucking creep shit.
Yeah. So nothing happens to Robert Keenan. Everyone is all the officials, the DA, the sheriff is like, well, I was under the impression that he was working some undercover work.
Yeah, exactly. That was the...
So he was under the impression that he was doing undercover work.
Right.
I mean, in the meantime, he was doing undercover work. Mason knows this guy as a cop. Because he met him when he called the cops to handle some kids.
Yes.
Right.
And what happens is that Robert Keenan gets another job. He moves to another town and becomes like an under sheriff, if that's a job title. I think something like this.
They probably made it up just for him.
Yeah.
Deputy.
Yeah, you've been demoted to under sheriff.
Maybe even promoted because he is in another town. But this also doesn't work for him because what happens is that someone makes a lot of photocopies of the girl's statement and sends it dozens of copies to all important people in the Las Animas town. So the mayor, city council members, county commissioners, ministers, teachers, parents. It was like it didn't have a return address. It was like sent from Birmingham, Alabama. No one took credit for doing this, but it like created a commotion.
Yeah, that's what people had to do before Facebook.
Yeah, yeah.
Fucking print out 600 copies. Of
I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of these things that I'm talking about now come from like a text from a local newspaper. I think a Denver newspaper. Called Westward. So it's a text which was published in '95 that I'm using as a source. We can also put a link for that. But yeah, as I said, nothing really happened to Robert Keenan. What happened to him actually soon after that, it was that he crashed his car, his cop car, while driving drunk. And then he quit his job.
Oh, no. No, he quit. Yeah. He was like, well, that's enough for me. Yeah. And the cops are like, you sure? Yeah. You sure that's enough? You want to go fucking...
Here, go do some more pedophilia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this text, actually, Mason was kind of... he even says in some interview that he doesn't take anything against Eva for calling the cops on him when he was threatening them with a gun, because he got a lighter sentence, because if he was it made him it was available for him to have some kind of a bargain and to go to jail for that, and not for having something sexual with the girl that the cop also had something sexual. So I think everyone's happy.
That's just fair.
Yeah, everyone was, I guess, happy to drop those charges at that moment, and he went to jail for threatening them with a gun. He got 3 years of prison. So he says himself that he's very happy to go for that kind of reason to jail and not the other thing, because this gives him more street cred in the movement.
Well, this was, he said that he wasn't going to go to jail again unless it benefited the white race, and this clearly does that.
Yeah,
this is prime importance to the movement.
Yeah, also he made another resolution after this case, and he said, never again, he vows, will I live in a one mule town.
One mule town. Yeah. So he moved all the way to Denver. The bright city lights.
Yeah.
The Mile High City.
Never sleeps.
Yep.
Or wakes up.
So, yeah, this is this horrible story. He was also supposedly, when the time the story was published in 1995, he was in some minimum security prison, I think. He was bragging, yeah, this is like a retirement home. Some people pay great money to be somewhere like this. But in an interview that he gave in 2002, he says that he was 2 years in a maximum security prison. So I think maybe after that interview when he was bragging how he's having fun, maybe they put him in a maximum security prison.
Or he embellished.
Or he just fucking lied.
Yeah, maybe.
Stolen prison valor.
Yeah.
All right, well,
yeah.
Should we tie this off? Tie this wound off.
He went to prison again in the 90s. I'm not sure exactly for what. I think from probably breaking parole or something like this.
I'm just gonna say kiddie porn.
Yeah,
it's a fair bet.
Put it out there.
Most of the 90s he was in prison. I think last time he was in prison was 99. I think. So 90s was mostly prison, in and out. And after that this last round of prison was important because he had another revelation. He went to prison with the mindset that he's gonna finally crack the Bible. So he went with the mindset I'm gonna see if there's something here or not. Because all of these Christian identity types were telling him that this is a racial book. So he decided, I'm gonna find out if it is. So he did. He adopted basically confirmation bias as a methodology.
Yes.
And or tried to find racism in the Bible, and he did find it a lot.
I think
he went for every single racial reference he could find.
Right. Well, he wrote a book comparing it to Mein Kampf.
This is he published when he got out of prison in 2000. He published the book The Theocrat. Which is comparison.
I think it's in its 4th edition now.
Yeah. So this is the comparison between Mein Kampf and the Bible. It proves that the Bible is a racial book. But also, this gets us into the next topic because he is a kind of Christian identity guy now, but also one who believes that basically the white race was created by aliens.
So, with that said, join us next time for Christian Identity and UFOs and James Mason.
So next time we're going to treat you with clips and excerpts of James Mason so you get the feel of who this man is. But the reason why we're doing it is going to be yet another episode after that where we finally bring up siege culture, Atomoffen, all the little babies of this terrible parentage here. And that's it. So, yeah, it's completed.
See you soon.
Bye.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.